advice in the Council's legal team.
Karina Haskins from Democratic Services.
Okay, thank you. Please don't remind council and members of the public to switch their phones and other devices to silent or turn them off. The meeting is being filmed and recording will be available on the council website. Anybody speaking not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operator. Emergency evacuation procedure, please.
Thank you, Chair. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the illuminated green signs to the exit using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest Bath Abbey or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts, and the assembly point is in Orange Grove on the green outside Bath Abbey. Thank you.
Apologies for absence substitutions.
Apologies from Councillor John Leach, and we have Councillor Ian Halsall substituting.
Declarations of interest. Apart from those already received. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. In relation to the application for the supermarket in Saltford, Keynsham, I'm a director of the Radstock Cooperative Society, which is relevant with regard to the Waitrose remarks.
Thank you. Urgent business by the Chair, there is none. House of Public Statements and Questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members of the public about the procedure for public speaking. Speakers will be called immediately after the case officers made their presentation. The order of speakers and time allowed for speaking will be as follows. Objectors will go first and be allowed 3 minutes in total. Supporters will be next and allowed 3 minutes in total. And ward councillors who have indicated they wish to speak may do so for a maximum of 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting 13th of May 2026. Councillor Halsall.
Chair, can I just ask for a slight amendment on page 5, paragraph 116. I wasn't the Mayor of Bath, I was only the Deputy Mayor, but if maybe we can make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I see a move of the correct record of minutes, please? Councillor Jackson, thank you. Second to Councillor Warren. All those in favour? That's clearly carried. Right, the first application, land to the east of Providence Bungalow, Froome Road, Radstock. Christina Carter, please.
Good morning. My name is Christina Carter. I will be presenting this application on behalf of Danielle Milsom, who is on annual leave. She is the case officer for this application. This application was at committee last month. However, it was deferred because the councillors were unable to perform a site visit. The site visit was performed this Monday, and this application will be presented now. So, the application is for permission in principle, land to east of Providence Bungalow in Radstock. We can see here the site location in red. The site is outlined in red with the blue showing the land ownership. The dwellings would be sited within the red triangle. The access from Maple Rise is also shown. This access has been approved previously for a neighbouring development and is currently the subject of a technical detail application. Here we can see the site in a greater context. The site is located adjacent to the housing development boundary, which is annotated here in green. On this block plan, we can also see the previously approved permission in principle for 4 dwellings. And the dwellings that are the subject of the current application would be going immediately to the west in this triangle area. And this is shown here. This is the indicative proposed block plan. where the dwellings would be sited. We can see, so the dwellings would be positioned within the context of existing properties to the south, so and to, Maple Rise as well as the if the technical details application for the 4 dwellings shown here gets approved, then obviously those residential dwellings would be sited there. So it's quite a residential context. However, to the north, there is an open field. I understand that during the site visit, there was some uncertainty to what extent the application site was extending. And here in blue, it's shown against the aerial image of the area. So the access, as well as that triangle area where the dwellings would be sited. There was also some concern raised regarding the impact on the tree line. This is a tree protection plan that has been submitted with the technical details consent for the erection of those 4 dwellings, which is showing the, in red, you can see the no dig zone. So all along the tree line, there would be no digging and no engineering works performed. Whilst this has not been determined, the arboricultural officer has assessed this protection plan and has offered no objection and is happy with this proposal. And finally, we have some photographs of the site. So we can see Maple Rise and the timber gates that would be leading to the new development, the proposed 4 dwellings, as well as the currently proposed 2. You can see the residential, the existing residential dwellings to the east, and then the open field. There is also some photographs here taken from the application site towards Maple Rise. There is some sloping of land towards north, as you can see in the second photograph. This is again taken from the gates, Maple Rise, showing the residential context. So, and this is the Frome Road. The application site is not very visible from the Frome Road because of all the residential dwellings. So it is quite shielded from that. And the office's recommendation is to permit. This is a permission in principle application. So the only thing that we can consider as part of this application is the location, the land use, and the amount of development. So we are asking ourselves, is this land suitable for 2 residential dwellings? All the other concerns, such as residential amenity, biodiversity, trees, etc., are then tackled at technical stage. So it's almost a 2-part application. This is only considering, is this land suitable for 2 residential dwellings? Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Statements of members of the public. We have one from Councillor Mansell, read by Karina Haskins.
Thank you, Chair. This is a statement from one of the ward councillors, Councillor Leslie Mansell. I write to submit a formal objection to the planning application for the erection of 2 dwellings on land east of Providence Bungalow, Frome Road, Radstock. This objection draws on the extensive planning history of the site, the council's own previous decisions, and the significant material harms identified by residents, statutory consultees, and previous inspectors. I support the objections already raised by residents and include comments from people in my ward who have previously raised planning objections. Unfortunately, they are able to unable to submit themselves due to deteriorating health conditions. First point, relevant planning history. The site has been subject to an unusually high number of applications, many overlapping and incremental. And these include, as well as the current application, 7 other PIP applications on the same site, earlier full applications, tree work applications, and there are 4 appeal decisions that were all dismissed. The cumulative pattern of repeated incremental applications is a material planning consideration and demonstrates ongoing attempts to secure development on a site repeatedly judged unsuitable. Second point, grounds for objection. A, harm to residential amenity, severe overlooking and loss of privacy. The site is elevated above neighbouring gardens. The topography means overlooking would extend across the full depth of private gardens, causing an unacceptable and unmitigable loss of amenity. B, conflict with conservation area policy, statutory duty, section 72. The land lies within a designated conservation area. The council has already determined any amount of development on this site would result in harm to the character of the conservation area. This is a decisive material consideration. Section 72 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act requires the council to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the area. This proposal would do neither. C, outside the housing development boundary. The site lies beyond the Radstock development boundary. Development here is contrary to the local plan's spatial strategy and cannot be justified under a PIP. D, unauthorised engineering works and access road. The applicant has constructed an access road without planning permission. This remains unresolved and should be addressed through enforcement before any further applications are considered. E, unsafe and inadequate access, highways objection. Maple Rise was designated as a cul-de-sac for 3 dwellings. Highways have already objected to the intensification of use. Residents note in their objections, the road does not allow 2 vehicles to pass safely. Emergency vehicle access could be restricted. The access is fundamentally unsuitable for construction, traffic, refuse vehicles, or daily 2-way movements associated with additional dwellings. F, ecological harm, tree loss, and failure to demonstrate biodiversity net gain. The site has experienced extensive ecological degradation as multiple trees have been removed. This has destroyed important habitat. Despite conservation advice, there has been no replanting. Species recorded include bats, pipistrelle and horseshoe, badgers, deer, owls, woodpeckers, slow worms, and grass snakes. The application fails to demonstrate compliance with policies NE3 and NE3A on biodiversity and measurable BNG. G, landscape harm and erosion of historic hillside. The hillside forms part of Radstock's historic landscape and conservation area, character zone 7, Rillington Collieries. The residents have noted that this proposal would extend the limit of development and detract from the rural and open character of this part of the hillside. This is contrary to policy HE1 and the conservation area appraisal. H, drainage, springs and ground stability risks. The land contains natural springs and has been destabilized by tree removal. This has caused concerns that the ground will become unstable, causing landslides. This raises significant concerns regarding ground stability, surface water management, and downstream impacts. I, cumulative impact and repeated applications. The pattern of multiple overlapping PIPs is a deliberate attempt to secure incremental development. This cumulative approach undermines proper planning control and should be given substantial weight. 3, conclusion. The proposal conflicts with multiple adopted policies, statutory duties, and previous council and inspector decisions. The site is a greenfield site within a conservation area, outside the development boundary, ecologically sensitive, topographically unsuitable, served by an unsafe and inadequate access, subject to unresolved unauthorised works. The council has already determined that any amount of development on this hillside would harm the conservation area. That conclusion applies equally to this application. For these reasons, reasons, I respectfully request that planning application is refused. And that's a statement from the Ward Councillor, Councillor Leslie Mansell.
Thank you, Karina. It's now time for members to ask questions of the case officer. Please remember to keep your questions short and to subject. Councillor Halsall.
Could you just, obviously mindful of Councillor Mansell's statement there and the topics that she raised, can you just confirm again the 3 criteria that we're only able to consider?
So as part of the permission in principle, you can only consider location, land use, in this case residential, and the amount of development, in this case 2 dwellings.
Councillor Simon.
Following on from that, some of the objections by Councillor Mansell are on policy grounds. Would those policies be defeated effectively by being out of date because of the tilted balance?
The policies regarding the housing, yes, we would be then looking at NPPF 11D because we can't demonstrate 5-year land supplies. The other policies that the councillor has mentioned, such as regarding biodiversity and trees and so on, would not be engaged in this source of application because we would not be considering such detail at this stage. Those would become relevant at technical detail stage. So just if you are minded to approve, that doesn't give the applicant free rein to build however and whatever they want and do with the trees and biodiversity. It will be rigorously assessed against the relevant policies at that stage.
Thank you. The other question relates to the site visit, and you weren't on it, but Adrian was, so perhaps Adrian can answer. We saw that there was a raised bank and a fence at the bottom of it, and we thought that the fence represented the boundary line for this application. Have you been able to confirm that?
Christine, can you bring up the tree protection? So obviously the only thing that's required to be submitted with a permission in principle application is a site location plan to scale, which they have done. Obviously on site, when we're looking at it, wasn't 100% clear where that, well, obviously we didn't go out with measuring tapes and to measure. That plan should be accurate, it is to scale. However, this drawing, which was taken from the technical details consent of the neighbouring permission, gives you an idea of the type of detail that we would require at technical details. And this shows, I'm not sure if you can see it very well, that the trees fall within the residential gardens of the houses that back on, and you can see the line, which is the fence line, which indicates the boundary of the site.
Yes, that's my reading of it too, but I thought it was worth confirming in committee.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. It was a very useful site visit, I must say. I hadn't been there for about 10 years. But I just wondered if the officer could help us with the location of the badgers set, which I'm told by residents is still where it always was. And there's an additional one for the teenage kids. You know, badgers kick them out in the spring when they have another litter. And the other thing in that field, I thought there was a swale right in the middle of the field to help with the drainage, because it's fairly wet even on a dry day. I mean, we had the pouring rain, but I wondered if we could get the pictures up again to have those indications. And finally, there is actually another path going down the hillside between the east of the Providence bungalow and the Mill Road at the bottom, which hasn't been mentioned, and I wondered if that could be shown. Anyway, here's a good one for the badgers set in the swale on the left one, where I think they are. Do we know?
I'm sorry, no, I wouldn't know it. But again, just to reiterate, we wouldn't be looking at that at this stage. We would be securing any biodiversity protection. We would be expecting PEAs, etc., at technical detail stage.
Well, this is where I'm probably a bit out of date, because I'm wondering what the relationship is of a PIP application to basic ecological features. NE6, is it?
So that would be considered at the ecological considerations will be dealt with at the technical details stage, which things like biodiversity net gain would have to be considered, but that's at that stage. In terms of the badges set, we don't have any details of that at the moment. Badges are actually protected under separate legislation. I think the swale that you're talking about, if it's there, that would actually fall within the previous permission in principle, which has already been granted.
Well, looking at that picture, could the officer indicate then, so I must have missed it, where
Sorry, could you put your microphone on? Just.
Sorry, I'm so used to addressing 2B on a wet Friday afternoon that I assume my voice carries, but I'd missed that one. Sorry about that. I just wondered if the officer, looking at where that might be a swale, where the actual division is between the PIP permitted 4 houses and this proposal for 2.
So the permitted 4 houses are on the, basically, if you look at the picture on the right, so they're broadly in line with the roofscape of the houses that you can see to the right of that photo. So that's where the permission in principle that is for the 4 houses has already been permitted. Now the picture on the left shows the right in the top left corner of that, sort of there, that, no, a bit, sort of there, just down the green bit of line, that's where these 2 houses would be going.
So the trees going up on the left-hand side are in people's gardens. What about the line across the bottom, which the Radstock Museum are rather worried about might get damaged?
They're outside the boundary of either development. If you bring up the site plan, they're actually at the far end there of the blue. If you see the blue line, they're there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gorley.
Do the officers have any idea where when the technical application is going to come for the 4 houses for which have already been permitted?
The applicants can submit technical details application.
It's already under consideration, so that's why we. Oh, sorry.
So when do you think that decision will be made?
Shortly.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for coming up with that technical drawing. That certainly answered a lot of the questions from the site visit. But I'm trying to understand, because it's quite frustrating that the main application didn't come to committee, and this one has. So I'm trying to understand, what is it that's brought this one to committee where the previous, for the main application, didn't? I mean, it falls outside the housing boundary. It's in a conservation area. So is there a specific factor in this one that determined it to come to this committee and not the previous one?
So both applications were referred to the chair through the scheme of delegation, and it was the chair's decision to not bring the first application for the 4 dwellings to committee, but to bring this one.
we answer from the Chair. The first application was not requested by the Ward Councillor to come to committee, the second one was. Councillor Jackson?
To comment, Chair, that the first application was vigorously rejected by the Town Council, who are rather unhappy about the fact that it didn't come to committee, but they hadn't really quite grasped the powers of the Chair. But I was just wondering, you're just saying it's because the Ward Councillor didn't ask for it. I
There was
thought
no
that if
comments
the
whatsoever.
town,
Ward Councillors.
Parish Council disagreed with an officer, it would.
I would expect to see the Ward Councillors put a request, and they didn't put a request at all. So that's where we are. Okay, if that's all the questions, it's now open for debate. Councillor Jackson?
If we could have indicated on the map where this other path is. It runs down from the Froome Road, just one block up from the Providence bungalow, but I guess you can't get it up. But there is another vertical line, the other side of that line of
Okay,
trees.
we'll have that question answered, please.
I believe that you're referring to the public right-of-way, which does run sort of that way. I don't know if you can see it, me indicating, but there is a public right-of-way.
I think if you bring up the other plan, it may show it clearer.
So I believe that you're referring to... Yes. So again, it would not interfere with this path because the development would be in this triangle.
Okay, thank you. It is now open for debate. Councillor Hensel.
Thank you, Chair. Right, we know Baines lacks a 5-year housing land supply, and because the government has doubled our housing target, and there's now this so-called tilted balance in favour of applications. The wording is very clear. It says the balance is whether the harms, and I quote now, significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of granting permission. And I can't see how this application is any particularly different to the previous approved permission for the other 4 dwellings. I can't see anything new that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of granting permission. Obviously, people that will live in those houses will benefit. Many of the objections that we had read out to us seem to be historical and applying to the bigger, larger site. And so at the moment, I'm minded to approve the application, but I'm happy to listen to other people's comments first.
Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, so there's a couple of points about this. With the new, with reference to Councillor Hansel's point, we are in a situation where it's very hard to refuse things when we are trying to find spaces for more housing. I know we're looking at the housing boundaries, and it seems to me that's a slightly bizarre housing boundary there when you've got houses on 2 sides of it, this slightly strange triangle. And we're also being urged to make efficient use of space, and frankly filling in a couple of houses in the remaining triangle seems to make to fit that too. So I like Councillor Hansel, I can't see what the problem and why the objections are to this when we have already given permission for 4 houses in that field. So I'm minded to support it.
Okay, can I someone do something, please, Councillor Simon?
I join my colleagues in supporting this. I think it's a reasonable use of land, and I would have supported the 4 had they come to committee. So to get things going, I'll move that we accept the officer recommendation.
A seconder, please. I will call you. Are you seconding? No, I'm not seconding. Right, let's have a seconder. Councillor Hansel seconding.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Councillor Jackson, you are next.
I would say that because of the uncertainty about boundaries the status of the housing development boundary and a number of other questions that have been raised, that the best we could do would be delegate to permit, because I think there are unanswered questions even for those of us who went on the site visit. I think that the advantage of anything coming to committee is that it can be looked at as a whole in its context, and that planning is all about context. And this, to me, 6 houses in this area is overdevelopment, and I can't see that the demand for X number of houses overrules the fact that this is a highly unsuitable area to put houses. However, we have the 4 houses permitted. So I would say enough is enough, and we should let this one lie, quite frankly, not least for the sake of the great crested newts that I've seen just below this site and are presumably around. I think we place far too little appreciation of the ecological damage that a development on a greenfield site can cause.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I think I remember what the officer said. Is it in principle application, not detail? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Well, my main concern with this and my main issue with it is that it is currently a conservation area and it is outside a housing boundary. Both those areas are created not by chance, but because there was a requirement to have them. Now, we're currently in the process of reviewing the housing boundary in the draft local plan, and I would suggest that that provides a democratic process for determining where houses should and shouldn't be built. And if this area should be built in, then it should be included in that draft local plan and subsequently approved then. But at this stage, it falls outside a housing boundary. It's not democratic to allow housing in that area. I wouldn't have supported the original application. I think Maple Rise is quite a poorly designed housing estate, which has a lot of problems, particularly with traffic and parking. And I think this will exacerbate those problems, so I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay. Councillor Jackson, quickly.
I would point out that members on the site visit may have noticed the beautiful bus shelter which Radstock Town Council provided by the Fossway Inn. However, there are only 4 buses a day going past, and I don't consider this as a sustainable location. And yeah, well, you know what I think about that.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. It's been moved and seconded. Any more speakers at all? No. Do you want to say Simon?
Just to say that I don't accept the variation to delegate permit because effectively we're just accepting the plans and the requirement to submit technical details. So I think it's either yes or no.
Okay, we're going to vote now. We're voting on permit. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried 7-3. Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Now we're on to 22 Tiling Road. Isabel Deon is going to present the report for a few moments.
Great. Thank you, Chair. So this is the first item on the main agenda. This is 22 Tining Road, which previously came to Planning Committee in January of this year, I believe. The previous scheme was for the demolition of the existing bungalow and the construction of 4 bungalows. That actually should read the construction of 3 new bungalows in the rear garden. So I apologise for the error on the presentation there. So this is a site location plan. So the application site is within Salford. It's in the housing development boundary, kind of in the more built-up area of Salford, not in the Greenbelt and not in the conservation area. This is an aerial view of the site. I'm just going to turn my laser pointer on so you can see. There we go. So this is the existing bungalow here, and then this is the rear garden, which you'll remember from the site visit we did back in January. For those that were on, it was quite a large, long rear garden. Then some site photographs. So this is the existing bungalow that's proposed to be demolished. The existing site access is here. This will be relocated to this side of the site. Actually, you can see it better on this picture here. And then some views just sort of down the street, the immediate neighbours. So this is the neighbouring property just here, and then this is the garage of the existing bungalow. And then that's the separation between number 24 and number 22 as existing. And then some photos of the rear garden, just so you can see the size and scale of the rear garden. So this is the existing bungalow and the neighbours at number 24 here. And then this is kind of the main garden area facing down the garden. And then you've got some more photos of the garden area. And then some facing back up the garden towards Tyning Road. So again, this is the existing bungalow. So this is the existing site plan. It's not that clear on the screen, so apologies, but this is the main bungalow here with its parking area to the front. You can see there's a few kind of, as you saw in the photos, like greenhouses and ancillary buildings, sheds, etc. in the garden. They will all be demolished as part of the scheme. So this is the previous site plan. So as I explained, the previous application was for the demolition of the existing bungalow and then to rebuild a new bungalow essentially in its place in the same similar area, and then to erect 4 bungalows in the rear garden. So that was refused by planning committee. The reasons are in full in the report, but essentially on the grounds of impact to character and appearance by way of it being a cramped development and there being kind of a lack of green infrastructure and the impact to residential amenity of the neighbouring occupiers. And now we have the current scheme. So the bungalow is still to be demolished and a new bungalow is to be positioned in a similar location. And then it's been reduced to 3 new bungalows in the rear garden. And as you can see, I'm going to actually put them side by side on this plan so you can kind of play a bit of spot the difference here. But these 2 bungalows at the rear of the site have shifted, so their garden areas are larger. You'll see there's increased areas of planting and new tree planting along here, and the rear gardens have got larger for this dwelling as well. So the designs are broadly the same as previously. So this is the chalet bungalow. So this is the proposed bungalow that will front onto Tyning Road. For those that were on the site visit, hopefully you'll remember back to January, but there's quite a variety of dwelling types on this street. So officers are comfortable that this design would be appropriate, and it wasn't something that was objected to the previous application. This is bungalow type A1, so this is kind of the next one around at the site. And then B1, which is one of the rear bungalows, and B2, which is the other rear bungalow. So B1 and B2 essentially mirror each other. Then I've got some kind of CGI's 3D images. These aren't to scale, but they should just kind of give an indicative view of what the site might look like. So you can see that there's proposed tree planting here now, and some within the site, within the centre, and the access road runs up along the side. So to summarise the application, there's been 14 objectors to the application. There's an objection from Salford Parish Council and Councillor Chris Warren. There's no objection subject to conditions from the Baines Arboriculture Officer and the Drainage Team and Highways Officers. Officers consider that the scheme complies with the development plan as a whole. Again, as with the previous application, paragraph 11D does apply, so the tilted balance does need to be applied. I've put that up on the screen in case anybody wants me to flick back to the wording. But officers' recommendation is to permit subject to conditions.
Thank you. We have public speaker time now. We have Tom Presswood, understands want to speak. Tom, I understand you don't want to be filmed. Are you aware your voice will still be recorded? Okay. You've got 3 minutes as you start, okay?
Hello, I'm speaking for all those objecting. The previous application was refused because of the harm to residential amenity under policy D6. The committee found it was completely inappropriate and one of the most overdeveloped schemes they had seen. The fundamental harms identified by this committee have still not been resolved. It was also refused for impact of character. The current proposal is still significantly higher in density, 30% higher, at 18 per hectare rather than 14 per hectare. Noting that a few properties further away have small gardens, totally ignores that the majority do not have smaller gardens, including those immediately bordering the site. Biodiversity loss is still over 40% down when it should be a 10% gain. These are clear indications that this is still contrary to character of locality, previously referenced in D2 and D7. Policy D6 requires developments to protect privacy, outlook and natural light, and to avoid significant harm to neighbouring occupiers. 22A is exactly as harmful in this respect as before. D6 has not been met. The officer's report discusses why the layout of the site has not been flipped, as we would all wish it to be. The report explains that it could affect properties on Collingwood, but this demonstrates the imbalance with this application. Significance has been given to protecting distant views and far longer gardens at Collingwood, while insufficient weight has been given to all of us immediate neighbours whose boundaries sit parallel right alongside. The report suggests that a fence will prevent overlooking, but fences do not remove overlooking when there are changes in level and where a building sits immediately adjacent. There will be a permanent loss of privacy and outlook. Some of the fences are now even being shown as being pushed very hard up against the precious hedge. The revised scheme still places buildings against neighbouring gardens, creating an overbearing relationship, which again conflicts with policy D6. The report states that overshadowing will not be significant, but the sun path here is not directly east to west in relation to the site. There will be a loss of light that we will suffer right when we need the light at the end of the day. Some final issues. The new location of the drop curb is particularly poor. It will be exiting exactly opposite where people park on Tyning Road. Having 4 properties trying to exit behind bushes when parked cars are opposite will result in accidents. We run a very small drainage company in Bath, and we know that planting a tree on top of the drain at the front of 22 for BNG reasons is actually just going to cause major problems with root ingress into those pipes in the years ahead. Also, losing that gully drain that is currently on the site, although a new gully is going to be put in, it's now going to be a gully that the traffic to the site has to drive over, and that's going to create noise and fill that gully with debris. We are respectfully asking for a second rejection because not enough has changed. We are confident this will result in a revised application that addresses all these problems for everyone's benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have Morgan Jones, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. My name is Morgan Jones. I'm a Chartered Town Planner, and I'm here today to speak in support of the application on behalf of the applicant, Mrs. Sandy Veer. And the property was Mrs. Veer's family home when she was younger. But today, the applicant and the architect have carefully considered the comments made during the assessment of the original application, and they've presented this revised proposal, which I hope you'll agree addresses the issues that have been raised. So I understand there are 2 key areas of focus. The first, the impact on the character of the area, and then the second, the impact on residential amenity. In terms of the first, the scheme has been reduced from 5 to 4, as you saw on the screen, in order to address the previous concerns about the overdevelopment of the site. The proposed density is 18 dwellings per hectare. That's compared to an average of 14 dwellings per hectare when analysing all properties within a 100-metre radius of the site. The revised proposal delivers larger gardens and space within the site for landscaping, and I know that officers agree it is an improved scheme. The planning history of the wider area is also a key consideration, with planning permission granted in 2024 for a bungalow adjoining the site in the rear garden of number 2 Collingwood Close to the north. That had a smaller garden area and also dormer windows. And officers and the chair of the committee at the time noted that the proposal was of a similar nature to other existing infill developments in the area. The current committee report advises that the layout does not appear cramped nor contrived, and I note officers consider that the proposal make efficient use of the available land within a sustainable location. In terms of the impact on residential amenity, the comments of the neighbours are understood because of the immediate change within the environment surrounding their property. However, when it comes to assessing the proposal against planning policy and industry standard, it's my professional opinion that there would be no unacceptable impacts on neighbour amenity. The proposed units will all be single-storey, with their overall height and separation distances between existing and proposed dwellings, fitting in with the established built environment. And the bungalows will be at a slightly lower land level as the properties than the existing properties to the south, as the submitted section plans have shown. And I'm aware officers advise that the reduction in the quantum of development is considered to have sufficiently addressed the previous reasons for refusal, and the scheme is considered to comply with policy D6 of the local plan. So in conclusion, I note there are no objections from officers on matters of design, character, impact on neighbour amenity, ecology, highway safety, and officers confirm that given the policy compliance, it's not considered that the quantum of development needs to be reduced further. And then finally, the proposed development will deliver new residential units which would contribute towards the council 5-year housing land supply deficit. And I agree that the proposal is policy compliant, and if the tilted balance was engaged, there are no planning harms that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So thank you. It is respectfully requested that planning permission be granted. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hounsell.
Before you start the clock, can I just explain, I'm not going to take part in the debate or the vote because I'm at the ward council. At the previous application, I spoke to the committee and again didn't take part, and this is to make sure that the decision that's made, there's no perception of bias in the eventual decision of the committee. So I will address the committee as a ward councillor, but later on I will withdraw. Right, you can start the clock now. Thank you. Thank you for considering this revised application today. My final words when I spoke to your committee in January were, I hope the applicant will reconsider and submit a better application. And this is a better application, with the number of proposed dwellings on the site reduced from 5 to 4 bungalows, leading to a consequent increase in the proportion of biodiversity net gain that can be achieved on site. It's now for you to decide if this application continues to represent overdevelopment of the plot, or if this now can be considered as an efficient use of the land available. The plot is within Saltford's housing development boundary, and development within this boundary is preferable to development in the surrounding green belt. Similar backland development nearby, which you observed on the earlier site visit, has been judged successful in planning terms. Baines lacks a 5-year housing land supply because the government has doubled the mandatory housing target. There is now the so-called tilted balance in favour of applications. The balance is whether the harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of granting permission. It was suggested at the previous committee hearing that the access road is on the wrong side of the plot, and the plans would be better reflected in a mirror line to place the access road on the right-hand side of the plot as seen from Tiny Road. However, that idea was not taken forward by the applicant, and you are obliged to look at the application that's in front of you. You cannot replace an application with another version you might prefer. The Highways Department has raised no objection. Any planning application can only be turned down on highways grounds if the impact is severe, and case law has established that applies only to public safety and not to congestion. Any objection has to be evidence-based, and any planning inspector considering an appeal will judge if you had acted reasonably in applying planning policy, particularly as the case officer has recommended approval. Any costs awarded against the council would be paid for by our council taxpayers. Should you decide that the application does not represent overdevelopment and are minded to approve the application, I suggest you choose the option of delegate to permit to allow the case officer to have the flexibility to further agree details such as the siting of trees with the applicant. The committee should also ensure that conditions attached are appropriate and effective. For example, the construction management plan needs to be robust to alleviate impacts on neighbours. Please satisfy yourselves that issues of overlooking and loss of privacy, particularly at number 24, are adequately addressed. New dwellings are of benefit to the people that will live in them, and as I say, you're required by planning law to ask yourselves, do the harms in this application significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of granting permission? But that judgment I leave to you after your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. We now have a statement from Councillor Chris Warren, read by Karina Haskins.
Thank you, Chair. Statement from the other ward councillor, Councillor Chris Warren. As ward councillor for Salford, I would like to register my objection to the proposed development. This new application is almost identical to the previous version. It is a clear overdevelopment of the plot and would adversely impact neighbouring properties. What is particularly troubling is the catastrophic effect it would have on the biodiversity of what is clearly a small holding that has been neglected for many years. Many different species can be observed inhabiting the site, and their habitat would be swept away by shoe-hoarding in 4 bungalows. My concern as ward councillor is the planning process has to be seen as accountable to give residents some element of democratic representation. Looking at the responses so far from the public, it is clear that the development in this latest application is unwanted and inappropriate. A reduction to 3 bungalows would alleviate much of the residents' very real and heartfelt concerns.
Thank you. Now questions from members to officers. Please keep your questions short and to subject, please. Councillor Hansel is now leaving us. Councillor Gorley.
If we go back to the spot the difference picture, please, that would be helpful. My question at the time was the overlooking, not so much the amenity for the neighbours, but whether the new bungalows would be overlooked by number 24, and I'm just wondering what's been done to alleviate that, and yeah, basically, is that a problem?
So, I mean, the bungalow that's likely to be most impacted by number 24 is this one here. It's been sited, as you can see, very, very close to the fence line, and I think that's a deliberate choice by the applicant to reduce the sight lines of overlooking into the window that is located here. It also means that this kind of patio area is more private because it, again, this kind of gable end that projects will protect the amenity there. So there will be some impact to that occupier. There will be a degree of overlooking. But I think in an area like this, which is fairly built up, there is a degree of overlooking into properties and into gardens that can be expected. So officers don't consider that would be a significant impact that would warrant refusal, but that is a judgment for the committee to come to today.
Thank you.
Councillor Simon.
Following on from that discussion, looking at those lines on the bottom, they look to be sharper than a 45-degree rule. Is it compliant with the general principles of 45-degree rule?
So I haven't actually measured in terms of what the angle of those lines are or the 45-degree rule, because that's not enshrined in our policy. It's a general kind of rule of thumb guidance, but it's not enshrined in our policy. This is obviously a development where this is single story, which will ultimately reduce the level of kind of intervisibility between those two properties. But I can't confirm whether or not it would comply with that rule, but that isn't adopted Bain's policy.
But your professional assessment is that the impacts to both houses aren't unacceptable.
Yes, that would be my conclusion. I mean, I'm absolutely not saying there wouldn't be any impact. There is clearly going to be a change as a result of this development, but in my professional opinion, that impact would not be significant.
And one other question, the accessibility standard, 2 of the properties are going to be built to M42. Is there any scope for having at least one of them fully adapted, M43?
So the policy actually only requires 2 of them to be M42, but I believe all of them will be built to M42 standard. There isn't scope for them to be M43, I don't believe, because of the layout and the adaptability, but that isn't a policy requirement, so we wouldn't be asking on a development of this size for that to be proposed.
Okay.
Councillor Jackson.
I was just wondering, I mean, you know, thinking about the previous decision and being consistent and all that, I was just wondering though, what's the situation, should these houses be built, with regard to having dormer windows and a loft floor, as it were, or an upper story floor, because I think a dormer window would certainly cause some unacceptable overlooking.
So I've actually recommended a condition to ensure that no dormer windows or additional windows are positioned in the roof. So that's no roof extensions or enlargements without a further permission being granted. So if any of the bungalows wanted to do a loft conversion, they would have to apply for a further planning permission, and then officers could fully consider whether there would be an unacceptable impact.
Okay, any further questions, anybody? Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to go back to the previous application. I recall there were two main concerns. One was the density, and I'm thinking about the density as a very local level. There's a similar estate just a couple of gardens away, isn't there? How does this density now compare to the adjacent developments? The one at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, so I don't have the exact density. I mean, I think the figures in the design access statement were that this development was 18 dwellings per hectare, and within, I think it's a 100-metre radius, or the radius of the site, it's 14 dwellings per hectare. So it is slightly less dense than the general kind of pattern and grain, I suppose, in this area. But this development to the south, I mean, visually you can see that it's fairly similar. The garden sizes are fairly similar. I don't have the exact numbers. I think what I would say to committee is I don't think you should focus necessarily on solely the number in terms of density, but looking at the character and how the development would kind of look in the general area. And I think this aerial view is quite helpful in showing that. So I think that's kind of what members should be considering, is whether the density that's being proposed would harm the character of this location.
Yeah. And secondly, I think one of the second issue from the previous one was the concern of loss of amenity for number 24. And it wasn't just a case of the loss of amenity for number 24, it was the loss of amenity for the new properties being overlooked by 24. And I don't see anything in this that addresses that issue.
So I believe I sort of answered this in terms of Councillor Gawley's question, but I don't think that there would be, my professional opinion is there wouldn't be significant harm to this occupier. Again, committee are entitled to come to a different view. There is a 2-metre high closed boarded fence proposed along this boundary, which will obviously provide some protection. But ultimately, there are, let me just go back to the site photos. You can see on number 24 in this one, there are dormer windows. So there is already a degree of overlooking into this garden area. And I think in an area such as this, where houses are built next to each other, there is an understanding that there is likely to be some overlooking into residential properties and residential gardens. My professional opinion is that that wouldn't be significant to a point that would warrant the refusal of the application now, because we've reduced the number of dwellings, that closed border fence is now proposed. So there are differences, and that's why officers have come to this conclusion. But again, that's for the committee to decide.
Councillor Jackson.
I have to admit I'm quite appalled that we don't have any planning policy which prevents a perfectly good house being demolished, but that being as it is, what I was wondering, again thinking about carbon footprint and so on, I couldn't quite pick up from the drawings if there were garages as part of each little bungalow, and whether a car driving in would be able to turn round, or would it have to reverse out backwards onto the road?
So the properties don't have garages, but there is sufficient space to turn. So there's a turning head at the site here. There's also sufficient space on the driveways to enter in, reverse out, and then drive out forward onto Tyning Road. So we're satisfied as officers that they wouldn't have to reverse onto Tyning Road to exit the site.
Councillor Horsall.
Thank you. The applicant obviously listened to the views of the committee from last time, obviously reduced the total number of units from 5 to 4. Irrespective of the decision we make today, are they still in time to appeal against the refusal of the 5, or has that expired now?
I would have to check the dates actually, but I believe we might be out of that 6-month period. I would have to double check.
Thank you. Any further questions, anybody? Nobody is open for debate. Someone going to move? Councillor Gorley.
I think I'm going to repeat what I said before in terms of, you know, the need for a 5-year housing supply, the need for efficient use of space. And actually, I think the fact that these are bungalows, smaller, affordable, suitable for older people, I think all of that is good. And because the applicant has listened and taken some consideration of this, I don't see what grounds we have to refuse it anyway. So I would, well, I'll wait to hear what other people think, but I might be minded to move the motion to permit.
Councillor Crosley.
I take a different view. 5 was massively overdevelopment, and this is just simply overdevelopment. And I think it's cramming far too much into this space. I'm not even sure that I think 3 would be sufficient. I think this is, I've got to be careful what I say here. I think this is trying to take advantage of the government directive that we've got to build. And I think here in our communities, we've got to be careful of that directive, because the most important thing is we have communities that are harmonious and live together. And I think when you have such concentration of housing into a garden, what you start doing is it's not just this development, is that you create precedents for future schemes and future gardens to be subdeveloped on the same intensity. So my view is this is overdevelopment, and I'm happy to move refusal on the grounds of overdevelopment.
Okay, do I see a second of that at all? Councillor Warren. We're debating the issue of refusal for overdevelopment site. Any more speakers? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I think I come to the same conclusion as Councillor Crosley. I think had they have taken note of the concerns previously and gone for a free property development here, I think it would have fitted into this this location. I do feel that 4 is still an overdevelopment.
Councillor Simon.
I'm with Councillor Gorley. I think this represents a good use of available land. I'm in favour of combing out potential development sites in order to make windfall gains like this. It's good that they're going to be built to M42 standards and can be then converted to 3 if need be. So I'm in favour of this application and against the resolution.
Okay, we're debating refusal. Any more speakers? There are none. Let's go to the vote then. Those in favour of refusal on the overdevelopment site? Okay, thank you. Those against? Okay, that's defeated. We're now open for debate again. Councillor Simon.
I'll move acceptance of the officer recommendation with the proposed conditions.
Have a seconder? Sorry. Do we wish any further debate? No. Councillor Warren, you want to speak?
Yeah, I will, thank you, Chairman. And the reason I was happy to second this was because it's a good use of space, it almost is, unless you live there, and then it's not. It doesn't quite fit in with the surrounding area. It is a little bit overdeveloped up against the rest. I think we should take that into context. Again, does it have an adverse effect? It does if you live there. And I think we have to look after our residents. I know we're pressure from above, the government. However, I don't think what the government says is always right, to be honest with you, and I think in this they're totally wrong. Hence, again, I was happy to second Councillor Crossley's movement, and I still do not think this is quite there. It's an improvement from last time. I said instead of being hugely overdeveloped now, it's just overdeveloped. So I think we're getting closer, but this isn't it.
Thank you. We're going to the vote on permit. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried 5-4 to permit. We are now going to take a 5-minute comfort break, and we come back for the last item, last plan application. Want to present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this item that is before committee is proposal. It's a full planning application for demolition of existing buildings on the site and construction of a new food store, which is use class E, together with associated works, including parking, substation, access, landscaping and highways. So the site itself is shown by the red outline there. It sits within a allocated site, which is covered under policy designation K3. That's the purple, pink outline there, and it also forms part of the allocated primary industrial estate. Site's located at the edge of Keynsham, and on the map there you can see Salford as well as Keynsham. The primary retail areas of those two settlements are also indicated through the blue dashed lines. So in terms of format for the presentation, what I'll just do is give a quick verbal update to members, because we received an additional representation from third parties on the 8th after the update report. I'll then quickly show the site context and the plans before kind of going through the planning considerations of the scheme. So the third-party representation ultimately just raised considerations in terms of the weight that was applied to various different aspects of the proposal. It's worth members noting that the weighting that officers have given is what they feel is appropriate in their professional opinion. That hasn't changed as a result of anything, but you are entitled to weigh planning considerations as you see fit. It was also raised, particularly in relation to the principal considerations, which we'll come on to a little bit later, that they were not fully detailed in the committee report. The reason for that was because that would have introduced several more pages of writing into the report, and in order to keep it concise and address the pertinent points, it was felt that replication of consultee comments was not necessary. Those were summarised within the representations, and ultimately, as you'll hear later, it doesn't affect the conclusions that officers came to, or the weighting that we've given those policies. So in terms of the site itself, I've got some photos of the site. As the site address indicates, it's a former nursery which has been inactive for a considerable amount of time now, and the site has largely kind of returned to grass and shrub. These are the closest neighbouring properties. They're residential, 2-storey in height. Frontage of the site fronts onto the A4, which is a busy road, and there's a petrol filling station, a car wash and a restaurant in the vicinity, all of which are a single story. So some views across the site. It's a little bit hard to see on this screen, but in the background here is the Keynsham Recycling Centre, and there are some lower kind of buildings here, storage buildings. Those are proposed for removal as part of the application. This is the view the other way, and you can see the petrol filling station there. You'll also see that the existing bus stop is located directly outside the site. So some more views of the highway. There is a signalised junction and pedestrian crossing facilities that are being implemented as part of the housing development, which is being built out on the opposite side of the highway. So the proposal itself, this plan is actually orientated with east at the top of the page. So we've got the A4 on the right-hand side of the picture here. There is an entrance on the eastbound carriageway into the car park. So that is a junction which is set up to only accommodate left-hand turns from eastbound traffic. Everybody else would need to access the site from World's End Lane, which is located there at the northern extent of the site. There is access and egress onto World's End Lane, and that's a requirement of the allocation policy. So the car park would be situated on the southern portion of the site. The access through the site would be on the western edge there, and the food store itself and the loading bay would be located to the eastern portion in that kind of corner there. So elevations of the building, it's pretty typical in its nature of a food store. It's basically going to be constructed of kind of like a grey brick and lias stone, which was at the request of officers during quite a considerable period of assessment. Also includes some glazed areas and metal cladding. Just for completeness, this is the proposed layout of the store. So you've got the access that comes in from the car park, and then the actual retail floor space, divided into aisles with the tills, and then back of house and the loading bay, which is located at that eastern extent of the building and site. So finally, some sections just through the site showing how the levels change and its relation with surrounding land uses in terms of height of the petrol filling station and the two-storey dwellings. I think it's worth highlighting that the site's allocated for industrial uses, so there's an expectation of kind of industrial buildings being compatible with the character of the area there. So on to the planning considerations. Most importantly, these are the principle of development, retail matters and highways matters, but officers have also comprehensively assessed the design, character and appearance, residential amenity, drainage, arboricultural impacts, ecology, climate change, as well as the benefits of the scheme. So in terms of the principle of development, as I mentioned earlier, the site forms part of a designated primary industrial estate. This is the Broadmead, Ashmead, Pixash industrial estate, and therefore policy ED2A applies. Site's also within the employment land designation as part of K3A, which is a strategic allocated site. In terms of policy K3A, this allocates the site for employment land within use classes B1, B and C, B2, and any employment use not falling within the MPPF definition of a main town centre use. Clearly, the proposal being for a food store, which is Class E, is a main town centre use, and therefore it is fundamentally contrary to the allocation policy, and that's a significant consideration. Policy ED2A sets out the areas identified as strategic and other primary industrial sites, means there's a presumption in favour of retaining them for those industrial uses. There's strong economic reasons why other uses would be inappropriate because of the economic significance of those areas, and the policy sets out that applicants seeking to challenge that presumption should provide compelling evidence that circumstances have changed to the extent that there's no reasonable prospect of the land or premises being used for the allocated purpose. So this is one of the matters that has come up in third-party representations. They say that's not been kind of described in detail in the officer report. Fundamentally, advice from policy and economic development officers are that that compelling evidence has not been provided, and therefore it's contrary to that policy. That's the view of myself as well. The evidence has been provided, it's been considered, and fundamentally it doesn't alter our view that actually it would be, that there's no kind of compelling evidence to suggest that the circumstances have changed such that it shouldn't be designated as a primary industrial estate and safeguarded for that purpose. We can therefore conclude in terms of the principle of development that the application represents a loss of allocated industrial land and is non-compliant with policies K3A and ED2A. In terms of retail impacts, the MPPF and our local policies set out that in the first instance a sequential test should be applied to retail development, with main town centre uses being located in town centres, and if none of them are available in edge of centre locations, and only if none of them are available in kind of out of town sites. The information that's been provided by the applicant has been reviewed by officers and our consultants who advise on retail impacts, and we are satisfied that there's no sequentially preferable sites which exist. This is based on an evidence base of what's in our local plan, in the housing and economic land availability assessment, and in knowledge of the local area. So a couple of other sites have been considered in some detail. I think perhaps the most relevant one is a site that's also on the industrial estate closer to the Waitrose. It's currently occupied by Jewsons. In terms of its accessibility, it's no better than the existing site. In terms of its policy situation, it's the same as the existing site. And in terms of its proximity to the local centres of Keynsham, it's no closer. In reality, it's still out of town, so it's caught in the same kind of policy consideration as this. So overall, the view of officers is that that site is sequentially equal to what we've got here, so it's no better and no worse. Accessing them and its relationship with the town centre is essentially the same. In terms of when we're considering sequentially preferable sites, we have to consider whether they're both suitable and available, and that's being considered by officers in the selection of those sites. Having considered the sequential test, it's also then necessary to apply a retail impact test to ensure that the proposal doesn't have a significant adverse impact on the vitality, viability and diversity of existing retail centres, or would have a significant adverse impact on existing committed or planned investment in a centre or centres in the catchment area of the proposal. So in terms of our consideration for this, a lot of information has been provided over the course of the application and considered again by officers and our consultants. It is the case that the proposal will have a draw in terms of custom from other retail providers. Some of that is locally, and some of that is also trade diversion from shops further afield, either because it's more convenient to access this site or the retail offer is preferable to those customers. Of particular consideration is the fact that the Tesco in Keynsham acts as an anchor store for the settlement and the high street and the retail area. So that information has kind of been quite robustly interrogated by Nexus, our consultants, and they're satisfied that although there will be considerable trade diversion from that Tesco, given the health of it as it currently operates and the health of Keynsham Town Centre, while there would be quite considerable draw, that would not diminish the overall health of the centre or compromise the operability of the Tesco to the point where it closes and fails in its purpose as an anchor store to the detriment of the local centre. So it is considered on balance that although there will be some impacts, the local centre will be able to withstand them, and therefore they wouldn't be significant. But that is a matter of planning judgment, obviously, and you may apply weight as you see fit. In terms of the highways impacts of the scheme, the accesses and the layout of the site and the amount of parking provision have all been considered. Highways officers consider that the actual layout of the proposal and the arrangement is acceptable. It provides cycle parking, it's sustainably located. We do, however, have significant concerns about the character of the trip generation, and some extensive modelling has been undertaken through a kind of robust model, and what that shows is that there will be significant queuing on the roads throughout the industrial estate. So in particular, that's Broadmead Lane, Pixash Lane and Ashmead Road. The drawings on the screen are a little bit difficult to see, but in terms of what they show, they essentially show traffic speed, and the greener the lines, the faster the traffic is moving, and gradually as you kind of come to the red and pink areas, that is where traffic's moving at a much slower rate. So you can see on the left-hand side, the DM stands for do minimum, which means without the proposal, and the DS stands for do something, so that is with the proposal. You can see on the A4, the impacts aren't really felt. It's pretty negligible in terms of the traffic flows there. However, there's considerable differences in how traffic queues and progresses along these other roads inside the industrial estate. So in terms of the conclusions, and these have been presented in information provided by the applicant, there's no difference in view on the actual impacts in terms of what's presented. It shows that while overall levels of that the overall levels of queuing do increase with the inclusion of the Aldi development, and most notably in the 2032 scenario, the local network, which is those roads on the industrial estate, reaches saturation and queues extend to the limit and beyond of the model extent. So it's worth noting that the model shows kind of a snapshot in time. It shows the weekday afternoon peak. In terms of that locality, similar impacts would more than likely be felt on the weekends, and also kind of at other times, because traffic flow on the A4 is fairly consistent. So Broadmead Lane and Pixash Lane experienced the most significant increases in queuing and delay. As I mentioned earlier, the A4 is not materially affected. Conclusions have been fairly consistent throughout the entirety of considering the proposal, but the VISM model that we've kind of done the latest iteration of assessment against provides greater confidence just in terms of traffic behaviour and distribution across those various roads. Worth noting that that model is also based on a currently banned manoeuvre, which is a left turn at the end of World's End Lane, being removed. So the applicant would need to secure a traffic regulation order to remove that left turn ban. So in terms of the other considerations, Officers, as I say, have assessed the proposal in terms of its character and appearance, drainage, trees, ecology, climate change, and kind of all other planning considerations. And it is felt that having discussed the proposal over a significant length of time and received amendments, officers are satisfied that all of those matters are satisfactorily addressed, and that's reflected in the comments from consultees. In terms of, well, what I'll do, I'll just go back to the traffic, because I think it's worth highlighting that the bar of whether there's a significant effect on the operation of the highway is very, very high. And in this instance, the queuing would be across the entirety of the industrial estate. So occupiers of those premises and the operation of the industrial estate, which is obviously a primary strategic industrial estate, would to a fairly large degree be compromised by that traffic queuing. That's obviously just because their deliveries would take longer to get in and out of the site. People would take longer getting to and from work. Going to meetings would be taking longer. It's also worth highlighting that the council's waste and recycling centre is accessed through that part of the road network, and therefore kind of bin lorries and people taking their recycling to the centre would experience delays, which could potentially affect those operations and have increased costs for the council. There's also a police station located on the industrial estate, and it's the view of the police service that the queuing would have potential to impact their emergency and operational response from that police station. That's set out in their comments. They've also highlighted in their representation that they feel the proposal could adversely affect road safety with people pulling out onto the A4 just because of the kind of consistency of traffic flows along there, and the fact that people have been waiting in a queue for an extended period of time. That could lead to people pulling rash or pressured manoeuvres, pulling out perhaps in spaces that they wouldn't ordinarily pull out into, which could lead to road traffic collisions. So the consequence of that is that officers do feel that very high bar of significant effect on the highway and highway safety has been met through this proposal. That's the view of highway officers as well, and for that reason it's considered that the proposal is contrary to policy ST7 of the development plan. So as I mentioned, it is considered acceptable in terms of all those other kind of matters, and it's important to consider the planning benefits of the proposal. So I've grouped these into kind of economic, environmental and social considerations. So in terms of economic, it's a significant economic investment into Keynsham and supports local economic growth. Would provide approximately 40 to 50 on-site jobs, including managerial roles. Provision of training and career progression opportunities. There's wider employment benefits through construction and supply chain roles. And it would also safeguard land that further to the east, which is part of the industrial allocation, and that would help overcome a previous reason for refusal of a previous application on that adjoining land. So it therefore it would not prejudice the delivery of the further kind of strategic ambitions of the site. In terms of environmental considerations, there's provision of 34 new trees and additional landscape planting. There'll be a number of ecological features, including bird and bat boxes, and it would achieve kind of policy compliant levels of biodiversity net gain, both on-site, and some of that would have to be delivered off-site through biodiversity net gain credits. The building itself is of a highly sustainable design, includes solar panels and air source heat pumps, and fulfills the council's policies in terms of sustainable construction. And in terms of social benefits, this is something that's kind of particularly been made apparent through the representations. We've received approximately kind of just under 200 representations. It does give increased retail choice for local residents, gives them greater variety and choice in the quality of what they're purchasing. And there's also enhanced competition, which has potential to reduce local prices. So it would also mean that some people wouldn't have to travel as far to their local supermarket. So all of those benefits, officers afford significant weight. They're all very beneficial and obviously derived from the proposal. As I mentioned, overall, officers find the proposal to be contrary to policies K3A and ED2A, those are the principal policies, and ST7, which is the highways policy. There are significant economic, environmental and social benefits of the scheme, whilst the proposal does not comprise the provision of an industrial use. The site is currently not used productively, and it's recognised that the development would still generate and support a considerable number of jobs and is sustainably located. And for that reason, while harm would occur through conflict with those in-principle policies, officers are of the view that the benefits of the scheme would outweigh those harms, and therefore we're not minded to recommend refusal on those grounds. The submitted information does, however, very kind of definitively show that the proposal would result in a severe cumulative impact on the operation of the highway network. The highway impacts would harm the function of the primary industrial estate and severely disrupts operational effectiveness of the council waste recycling centre and the nearby police station. The impacts would also have potential to harm highway safety. The severity of these impacts is not considered to be outweighed by the benefits of the scheme. It's therefore recommended that the scheme is refused given its impacts on the operation of the local highway network, and for that reason officers recommend the application is refused for the following reason. The application has failed to demonstrate that as a result of the development there would be no severe cumulative impact on the operation of the local highway network. The modelling undertaken indicates the development would create significant queuing, which would be prejudicial to the operation of the primary industrial estate, council waste recycling centre and police station. The impacts would also have potential to harm highway safety. The proposal is therefore considered to be contrary to policy ST7 of the Bath and North East Somerset Local Plan Partial Update and the National Planning Policy Framework, which seeks to ensure that development would not exacerbate highway safety and operational issues.
Thank you, Chris. Very comprehensive. We're now down to public speakers' time. We have Elliot Saunders, please. You've got 3 minutes when you start speaking.
Good morning, members. I'm Elliot Saunders, Real Estate Director at Aldi. First, I want to highlight the exceptional level of public support for this scheme. More than 190 residents have submitted positive comments to the planning file, and the message is clear. Keynsham wants and needs an Aldi. This is a major investment that will deliver real, tangible benefits, most notably 40 high-quality, secure jobs, with Aldi proud to be the UK's highest-paying supermarket. But the benefits go beyond employment. At a time when household budgets are squeezed, the store will give local family access to high-quality food at the lowest prices in the market. And we'll deliver this sustainably. A 10% biodiversity net gain, 34 new trees, enhanced landscaping, and a low-carbon building with solar panels, heat recovery, and 100% LED lighting that switches off overnight. Turning to the reason for refusal. I want to restate the facts from your office's own reports following detailed traffic modelling for both 2027 and 2032. There are no material impacts on the A4 in either year. There are no highways objections to access, layout, deliveries or parking. There are acceptable impacts at the Broadmead roundabout in 2027, and there are only marginal increases in journey times in 2032, and even then, they're limited to short periods in the weekday evening peak. Crucially, the most significant impacts at Broadmead are driven by background growth and committed development. These delays would occur with or without Audi. This is a wider network issue and not one created by this proposal. So I'd ask you to reflect when making the decision on everyday behaviour when determining the application. Do you choose to shop at the busiest times, knowing that you'll sit in traffic, or do you travel when it's easiest? In reality, all of us will adapt. And this site is also well served with a bus stop straight outside and strong pedestrian and cycle links. And really, this is the crux of the matter. The recommendation for refusal is based solely on modelling assumptions, not on real-life choices that we make when choosing how and when to shop. And national planning policy is clear. Applications must be determined on their own planning merits, not on speculative impacts that cannot be directly attributed to the scheme. In setting out speculative impacts, the officer's report goes far beyond what should be considered in any objective technical assessment of our application in its own right. Refusal on highways grounds would also risk undermining wider investment in this part of Keynsham, including the Council's own strategic employment ambitions. Your office has been clear. All of the matters are satisfactorily resolved. The sole issue cited is a network-wide challenge, not something that this scheme creates. In contrast, approving this application delivers investment, choice, jobs, sustainability and clear benefits to local residents without unacceptable highways impacts in its own right. So I respectfully urge you to listen to your residents, to recognise the opportunity in front of you and to grant approval for a new Audi that will serve Keynsham for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have Councillor Andy Waite's statement read by Karina Haskins.
Thank you, Chair. First, I must apologise for my absence. Unfortunately, this meeting clashes with a long-standing family commitment. I initially called in this application as I consider that it is of significant importance to be part of the Planning Committee agenda. I am grateful that the Chair and Deputy Chair are allowing it on the agenda. The A4 has a very heavy traffic load. There is regular congestion, which is well documented by all who use the road. The Higgy Park development opposite the proposed site, residents inform me, is very difficult to leave at most times during the day, especially if the motorist wishes to turn right onto the A4. Currently, Withers Green, a similar site development to Higgy, is being built, and as part of the plan, a set of traffic lights will be installed on the A4, which will help both Withers Green and Higgy Park residents leave their respective estates. This will create another hold-up on the A4 with even more congestion already in the pipeline. For the first time ever, when an application has come to the Planning Committee in my ward, my views are in line with the planning officer. A rare moment of unity. The case officer is making a recommendation to refuse based on traffic grounds. This is precisely my view. I think most residents of Keynsham East are in support of a branch of Aldi being available to the town. However, how the traffic can move off and on this site without creating a significant level of further congestion for those vehicles moving along the A4, not wishing to go to the Aldi, is a significant problem. And like officers, I can't see an acceptable solution. Serious thought needs to go into any further developments along the A4 at this location. It is common knowledge from the local plan options document and a planning application for a little store on the old Jewson site near Waitrose in Broadmead Lane that all developments at this location will face similar or greater congestion difficulties, but that is for another time. In conclusion, I support the opinion of the Baines officer on this planning application, and just to remind you, that's the statement from Councillor Andy Waite, one of the ward councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Hounsell.
Thank you. Again, just before you start the clock, if I can just explain, I have a close ward colleague who lives directly opposite the site. Also, I'm sure to have expressed opinions at some time in recent months. As ward councillor for Salford Ward, adjacent to Keynsham East Ward, in which the site lies, I think it's fair that I don't take part in the debate and the vote, so there's no perception of bias in the eventual decision. Right, you can start the clock now, thank you. I will only speak of issues of direct relevance to Salford. Although Salford Parish Council, in its objection, refers to the loss of green fields, this site was earmarked for employment purposes in the 2014 local plan. Development on this site was expected. There are many residents in Salford and the wider ward who have expressed a desire to have greater choice of local supermarket to be able to achieve lower cost, good value shopping. I'm relieved the traffic modelling shows no adverse effects on the flow of traffic on the A4 itself from the proposed development. Planning applications cannot be turned down on highways grounds alone unless the impact on the highway is severe and case law has established that's about road safety only, not congestion. Highways has recommended refusal on the grounds that bespoke traffic modelling demonstrates that Pixash Lane, Ashmead Road, Broadmead Lane would suffer severe congestion at times, which would lead to unsafe manoeuvres as drivers try to return to the busy A4. That situation is already experienced on occasion when shoppers at Waitrose have to queue in Broadmead Lane to access the two-lane roundabout back onto the A4. Shoppers heading to the proposed new store from the east, from the Salford direction, would seek to turn right to enter the store at the A4 entrance, despite that access being only intended for shoppers arriving from the west on the A4 and turning left. Shoppers from the east are unlikely to want to continue to the Broadmead roundabout and turn back. Will's End Lane contains the popular and impressive Keynsham Waste and Recycling Centre. Ashmead Road contains the police custody suite and other vital police resources. The area contains numerous businesses and traders. Highway states, quote, the application has failed to demonstrate that as a result of the development, there will be no severe cumulative impact on the operation of the local highway network. The proposal is therefore considered contrary to policy ST7 of the Bath and North East Somerset Local Plan Partial Update and National Policy Planning Framework, which seeks to ensure that development would not exacerbate highway safety and operational issues. Are the concerns of the Highways Department valid? Is the modelling valid? Can the highways matters be satisfactorily mitigated? I leave those important questions to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hensel. I understand you're now leaving us. It's now questions for officers, and can I remind you to keep your questions short and to the subject. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the question is vehicle movements, not the A4, so I think we understand that the A4 won't be hugely affected. But during the local roads at the moment, approximately how many vehicle movements are there per day now, and how many would you anticipate with the...
I can't answer the question of how many there are now because it will vary across the estate, but an Aldi store of this size would generate about 100 trips in and 100 trips out every hour. And that's fairly consistent through the sort of peak periods that the store operates.
But we don't know if there's 10,000 or 100,000 trips an hour now, it wouldn't be able to affect. If there's only 200, it would be. That's what I'm trying to get to. You don't know the approximate numbers.
Yeah, I don't have the detail of exactly how many operate on each road. I can't tell you that with the information I've got right in front of me right now. Sorry.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if, I mean, a lot of the debate hangs around, surely, the question of the economic benefits. So I just wondered if the officer could confirm the opening hours of the store, which are somewhat, well, I'm just thinking of our co-op, we have 10 o'clock closure, and Morrison's and ourselves 7 a.m. opening. So I just wondered what they would be, because the weight of the traffic is clearly going, traffic impact is going to vary according to what time of day people arrive to do their shopping. And secondly, it says 40 to 60 people employed. Would those be full-time posts? Because supermarkets very often employ part-timers, and therefore benefit more.
So in terms of the first question on opening hours, that could be controlled by condition if committee were minded to overturn the officer's recommendation. The only steer that's been provided through consultee responses is in terms of noise impact on nearby residential receptors, and they've considered that it would be appropriate for the store to open from a noise impact point of view between the hours of 7 o'clock and 11 o'clock. In terms of number of employees, my understanding is that the 40 to 50 employee figure provided is on a full-time equivalent basis.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at the modelling, the traffic modelling. So over what hours were we looking at in terms of how we modelled? I think the report tends to focus, I think, mainly on a peak period rather than the overall hours of the supermarket.
Absolutely. So the VISA model only exists for weekday morning and evening peaks. So the morning peak hasn't been modelled because this type of development wouldn't generate significant flows in that time period. So we've looked at the afternoon. So I think the period would be between 4 and 6 o'clock. So it's examined those hours. And that's what we based our judgment on.
So our concern about queuing is really narrowed down to a 2-hour time period in the afternoon. Is that where the assessments?
Not quite. That's the evidence that we've got presented from the latest set of modelling. There was earlier modelling that looked at a Saturday peak because clearly retail has a big impact on the weekends. The VISA model hasn't got a scenario for the weekend, so we have to sort of do some consideration of what the trends we're seeing from the afternoon and how they're reflected on the Saturday. So we would have concerns on the Saturday as well, yes.
Okay. And so I think there's 120 bays at this site, isn't there? So in the peak time, how many more than 120 vehicle movements are we looking at?
In terms of in any hour, it's fairly consistent. There'd be 100 arrivals and 100 departures. That's broadly, that's about the number
per hour?
Per hour, yes, exactly.
Okay. And typically people don't go shopping for an hour, so if you've got 100 coming in and 100 going out per hour, 120 bays, would that be sufficient to service that?
Yeah, that's one of the questions we asked about the accumulation of the car park, and they presented details and evidence to demonstrate that 120 would be sufficient for normal retail activity, yes.
Thank you. And do you think, I mean, one thing that is very difficult to calculate in the modelling is behaviour. People generally don't want to queue up to go into a supermarket, so I would assume that it would still dissipate people over a wider area to other supermarkets during those peak times to avoid the queuing.
It's a bit hypothetical question in terms of we haven't got the evidence to demonstrate that, but there is definitely a case for peak spreading, people making decisions, and that's always a consideration when reviewing modelling results in terms of what weight you would put on that sort of significance.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, could you bring up the modelling picture, that image? That's quite helpful. My question is about when the peak use for the waste recycling centre is used, particularly for retail, because I assume in the retail for people going and visiting the place of wonder, is there going to be a conflict in the morning with waste lorries going in and supermarket lorries going in, doing those deliveries, and is there going to be a conflict with people visiting both of those sites?
In terms of morning peaks, I think we just talked about it in terms of overall impacts of retail doesn't really happen in a morning peak traditionally, so there's less of effect, and we're probably not worried about the morning peak period, but there would definitely be potential conflict on a Saturday. Clearly the waste recycling would be very popular on a Saturday, and so would the retail. And in the evening, I suspect, in the model period, it might be that the recycling centre isn't used as much, but there could be earlier periods where there is a combination of the impacts, but we haven't been able to model that because the modelling doesn't extend that far into the
with the lorries going in
yeah,
there?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Simon.
Thank you, yes. I assume that the modelling assumes that the Pixash Lane and Broadmead roundabouts will remain uncontrolled. And if they were to be controlled, and therefore you could dissipate the queuing at those junctions by giving more time, then it would affect the A4 and make the A4 worse. Is that a correct analysis?
It's correct they're not controlled. I wouldn't want to make a judgment on the impacts of something. That would be quite a complicated bit of work to determine what the impacts would be. There'd be clearly an impact on the A4 if you put signals there. But whether that would be significant or not, I couldn't tell you at this time, I'm afraid.
But the applicant hasn't provided an analysis using that technique.
No, we haven't got an agreed position on potential improvements of signalisation on either of those junctions, no.
Okay. My second question relates to potential housing on the other side of the railway to the north of this site, where there's been discussion of a possible site between the railway and the river. Would this effectively preclude that site coming forward for housing purposes, because the effect on Broadmead and Pixash would be intolerable?
In terms of the prospective allocation of land to the north, I think that would be, policy colleagues would be looking at that and what kind of strategic highway interventions are needed to accommodate growth of kind of that scale. It's not really possible for us to definitively say whether this would preclude that or not, because we don't know what the nature of those interventions are. I think at this point in time, all we can say is that they're not presented or kind of in front of us, and we have to consider the proposal as it's presented today on the nature of the highway network as it is today, along with kind of any committed intervention that the applicant is proposing or that's already secured, which is done essentially apart from potentially the TRO for the left turn.
But if the allocation were to be in the draft local plan in the autumn, would that affect the consideration either for this committee or for, on appeal?
It could do, but I think that obviously it's a big could, where we haven't adopted that plan yet. We don't know what investment would be needed for that. I don't know if that kind of modelling has all been undertaken and whether they've actually determined whether that allocation is viable in highway terms yet.
Councillor McPhee.
I'm disappointed that you didn't, in your modelling, put in the controls on the roundabout, because clearly if you put the lights in, you can increase the speed of people leaving the site and coming on. I mean, that seems to me a basic way of doing it. So I would have thought you would have modelled that.
I mean, just in terms of our role, we assess what the applicant presents to us.
Okay.
So if the applicant came to us and with that scenario, then it's something that we could have looked at, but it's not something that the Highway Authority would suggest to an applicant that this might be a good idea to enable your development. The system doesn't really work like that. So we have to be slightly careful, but it's potentially something that could help, but again, we just don't have that scenario modelled, I'm afraid.
Right.
Councillor Horsell.
Just to confirm, there are no mitigations in any way being put forward of the site to try and at least overcome the concerns that the Highway Authority have?
The only real change of any detail that we looked at was on the Broadmead Lane approach to the Broadmead roundabout, in terms of changing some of the allocations on the lanes as you approach and widening. and that does have some impact. But again, because of the difference of the flows on the weekday and the Saturday, the impacts almost countered each other on those two periods. So because of the way the traffic is routed, so there wasn't any significant gain from that. So yeah, there's nothing further than that being promoted.
Has there been any discussion about whether it would be exorbitantly expensive or whether it would be practical? But has there been any sort of hypothetical discussion about any solutions that could actually address the concerns?
Yeah, Dan's capable of answering this one, but I felt I'd step in. So throughout the course of the application, the highways impacts has been something that both the developer team and the Highway Authority have been very alive to. They've had highway specialists on kind of their team look at the proposal, and obviously it's in their interest to find an acceptable way forward to deliver the scheme. It is a major retailer, so there are resources available to them to find those solutions. We have explored things like the lane alignment and things like that, which ultimately haven't been presented because the developer team has felt that their submission is as good as it can be based on what's there, and it wouldn't bring a material benefit. So I think in terms of looking at highway options, they have been pretty robustly considered, and the position that we've arrived at with the proposal that we've arrived at is as good as it can be. Obviously, we still feel that it's going to be unacceptable, but there's obviously considerable economic benefits of kind of providing this development and social and environmental benefits. So it's certainly something that if officers felt they could support or find a solution to, then we would have been keen to, but unfortunately that's not the proposal that's in front of us.
Okay, so a couple of questions from myself at the moment I want to ask. You've done your modelling and I'm working out on the minor roads in behind the A4. I'm looking at particularly the council's fleet operations of going in and out of the waste site. And in your statement to us earlier on, you actually worked out the peak time was a tea time issue. So surely that's not going to affect the council's fleet vehicles going in and out of the site. And the second part of the question as well is the police station operation times. I've been past it quite a few times, there's no cars there whatsoever. So understanding the police operations, normally emergencies, are normally in the evening, outside of those times you state for peak. So can you answer that question of how that model actually fits in, please?
Yeah, the alignment of the hours is certainly something that we've considered. The model, again, only assesses a period between 4 and 6. So you have to consider what the model tells you and how it would apply in other periods throughout the day. And you can look at that by the amount of traffic that Aldi will generate over the day is fairly consistent through the afternoon. So it would have a wider impact than just the model. And it would have an impact on the Saturday. So that's why we came to that conclusion that there could be an impact on the general operations of the industrial estate as a whole. It's not just the waste transfer station or the police station, it's all the other operators on the estate as well, which would generate traffic throughout the day and mostly at peak periods.
Mr. McPhee.
So, to my mind, the elephant in the room is the fact that up ahead we're going to have, is it 1,200 houses in Keynsham North, and we're going to have a road that's going to go from the Avon Mill Road round behind, and it will be possible to have a link to that road, and cars will be able to leave and go towards Bitton or come round and join. So that the presence of that road is actually going to take a fair bit of pressure off that particular section of the A4. But the problem is it's so far ahead. So we know there is a solution.
How can you
We're
phrase that
too
to a
early.
question, please?
I mean, in terms of a question, we haven't assessed that
Yeah.
at all in our analysis because it's a draft local plan that's coming forward at a future date, so it wouldn't be appropriate to assess it. So I think that's all I can say on that point.
Councillor Jackson.
Could I request you, Chair, to speak into your mic when you've got competition outside the window, which may or may not be significant in terms of being a grinder? That's my first request. Second thing, I couldn't work out from the modelling whether the effect of having the Wellsway School sort of diagonally opposite the roundabout had been factored into the figures. Thirdly, will there be any measures taken to stop anybody using the car park as a park and ride? Because we have that problem at the co-op in spades, that people just go to the supermarket and then take off somewhere else. However, my solution would be, I wondered if you considered this, the development of Salford Station is clearly a long way ahead and will no doubt depend on WECA. But have you considered the possibility that the problems we're discussing would be greatly alleviated if there was a community bus, or even if the 522 were diverted into the site? Have you looked at that option of a community bus? Because I know there is one that they hope to have round the Shandag estate, and it could come into Aldi perhaps on the way.
The first question was about the Wellsway School, and that would be included in the model, so those impacts will have been assessed. The second question was about the car park and parking duration. It's typical practice at an Aldi store or any other supermarket to have a limitation on the amount of time you can park, which is normally 90 minutes or 2 hours, so that would overcome the concern you have there. And no, we haven't looked at a community bus, or it hasn't been promoted as part of the scheme.
Okay, thank you. That seems the end of questions. Councillor McPhee, are you the local member? You speak first.
So it is exciting to think that we could have an Aldi. We know that we need it. Our residents have told us on the door, and they've made it very clear. The numbers are maybe 200 houses being built on the Withies at the moment, and maybe 1,200. So we're going to need some more shopping. And it is therefore with great joy that we thought this would go through. In the document, I think they've done a very thorough job of looking at the alternative sites, and I absolutely agree with their conclusion that I couldn't find anywhere else closer to the centre to put it. I mean, the fact that the policy for retail goes the wrong way, I mean, it seems to me if you've got Waitrose down the road, it doesn't seem illogical that you could have another shop, similar shop nearby. But the crux of it, of course, is the highway solution. And I imagined that the data for a control on that roundabout would have been done. And there's something. I'm on red. Is that going through? Yeah. So I'm basically disappointed in that and wonder if there might be a possibility that traffic light control might get us to a reasonable thing. The presence of the other people at Jewson, I would agree that that's not particularly a better solution. So we come to everything, and basically the bottom line is that the A4 is, to most of us, I've waited 2 hours to get out of Waitrose on one particular day. So the traffic has to be right, and it clearly isn't, and so I will vote against that.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Okay, well, I mean, currently it's clear that from the comments that we've had from residents that the current carbon footprint is poor. Without local servicing for Salford and Keynsham, residents are having to travel further afield to find supermarkets and to find choice. And residents should be entitled to find choice. They should be entitled to a competition and choice, which they don't currently seem to have. The proposed site seems to be quite a logical site. It's next to an industrial area rather than residential, so it doesn't impact on the amenity of residents by putting it. So it does seem to be quite a good location to put this. I think it's important to understand that, you know, we're going to need a lot of supermarkets. That the draft local plan currently contains potential developments of up to 2,400 houses in Keynsham North, 1,300 in Keynsham West, 1,600 in Salfords, 1,500 in Hicksgate. So we're planning to build about 7,000 houses. So, so the need for supermarket and service and provision is clear from that. I think also we need to consider that at the moment, non-drivers don't have access or choice the same as drivers do. So I think it's important to understand that. It's also important to understand that that this site would benefit from really good public transport links. I think the A4 has very good, very frequent bus services. So with the issue of the transport, I do accept the modelling to an extent. We are only assessing a very small period of 4 to 6 in a day, and within that modelling, we're not taking account of people changing their behaviour to avoid the issue of 4 to 6. I mean, the supermarket, assuming it's going to be open from sort of 7 till 10 at night, we can't actually model how that will happen. But I believe people's behaviour will dissipate to avoid that time period or even go to other supermarkets. So for me, on balance, I think this does meet a need, and I'll be happy to support the application.
I have no motion on the table yet. Councillor Simon.
Well, I will move acceptance of the officer's recommendation. I absolutely accept that an Aldi supermarket in this location would meet residents' needs. The Tesco in the town centre, there's only one bus an hour from Salford. The location is sustainable, and I'm persuaded by the officer's conclusion that the only objection is on traffic grounds. But if the effect is to grind the entire estate to a halt for the evening peak and by implication for Saturday mornings or Saturdays, it would impact on the council's provision of refuse services. It would impact on the access to the police station, which is an important resource space for the police and is a custody suite. So people need to be conveyed to that custody suite. It would impact on traffic coming through the across the railway, and while I can't give weight to housing issues, I think that's something we need to bear in mind. It would also exacerbate the queuing I've observed coming out of Waitrose, I think that the traffic objection that has been put forward is material, and on that basis, and particularly as the applicant hasn't been able to demonstrate that signalising the junctions would allow a suitable solution, I feel we're going to have to refuse this application for the reasons set out in the report.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor McPhee seconding. Councillor Gorey.
I think Councillor Simon has actually expressed very eloquently what are my concerns. I think the idea of clogging up the industrial estate, actually I don't think this is necessarily a good site, because you've got to drive all the way through the industrial site to get there, and if people start doing dangerous manoeuvres off the A4 to get in quickly, I think that's a real concern. The fact it impacts and could impact the operation of our award-winning refuse and recycling centre, I think, is of great concern. And the fact that the Avon Somerset Police have expressed concern is also something that I am worried about. So whilst I totally understand why people want to have a discount supermarket in the area, and I think they deserve one, I don't think this is the right place.
Councillor Warren.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm a bit more inclined to look at the bigger picture here. Be interesting how many traffic movements there are now, which sadly we don't know. So I think it's probably considerably more than we think. I think this will have more effect potentially on a more positive effect, I should say, on Salford rather than Keynsham, because Keynsham, they do have Tesco, they do have, I think it's Iceland up at the other end. Salford don't have anything really, they're small at Tesco Express. So a lot of that traffic would be coming from Salford anyway, when it's possibly going to Waitrose. So you could be double counting a lot of these. I don't think we get massive from Bath, for instance, like you think maybe from Turton could come out, because you always have a little there, okay, you have Marks and Spencer's there, so there'd be no reason to come out further. Salford and parts of the northern parts of Keynsham North, if you like, would be very walkable. We've got more houses coming, a lot more houses coming, they need to shop somewhere. Again, if it's going to be chock-a-block at 5 o'clock, I'm going to go shopping at 7 o'clock, or I'm going to go shopping at 3 o'clock. The effect it has on our council site, okay, there could be an issue there, that's a bit nearer the road. The police stations, it's custody, no more, no less, so you don't have people going in and out there. And if I'm a policeman and I've got some in the back of my van, I'm going to put the blue light on so I can get them in. They're great, these blue lights, it means you can drive past things. So I don't think that'd be such an issue with the police station. So I'm very minded at the moment to go against the Office of Reclamation. I think the benefits will I mean, there are major benefits, there are issues against it, and no one's going to argue that. But I do think the benefits outweigh the negatives at the moment.
Councillor Halsall.
Thank you. Chris, in his report, has been meticulous in demonstrating the benefits that this development could bring. Economic benefits, social benefits, employment opportunities. We have to make sure we don't just... I think there is probably a thing in retail where there is the Waitrose effect or the Aldi effect, where residents clearly, want the choice. And I know how popular these German supermarkets are in this country. But it's unprecedented that we ever really get an objection from a highway authority where they suggest that the impact of e-development, no matter how beneficial it could be, is severe. We had this debate a couple of years ago, didn't we, at Soulis Down? Everybody was opposed to it on highway grounds. We were advised very strongly that we couldn't refuse it because of congestion. It had to be on severity in terms of safety. Now, if the Highways Authority are saying there will be safety implications, I reluctantly would have to share the officer's recommendation and refuse the application. Whether that means that Aldi can take away the comfort that I guess we are largely supportive of the principle of development there. They could go away and have another think about what off-site works could be done and invest in some money in terms of looking at lanes, looking at signal control junctions, mini roundabouts, anything that could enable this development to take place.
Councillor Crosley.
Thank you very much. I think for me, I mean, there's a big question here about employment land versus retail land, and this is employment land. And we've got, people have mentioned the number of houses that are coming soon. Well, each house is going to have 1 or 2 adults in it and maybe some children, and that they will want jobs and employment. So unless we're saying that all the jobs and employment are going to be in the city of Bristol and the city of Bath, and in which case they'll be travelling backward and forwards to them, we do need a site with some employment opportunities that are local to Keynsham. And if you look at what's not been said is what is going to be the impact on Keynsham High Street. So Keynsham High Street is currently, it's got at either end of it a supermarket, and that maintains the viability, in my view, of substantially maintain. It's quite a big factor in the maintenance of the viability of Keynsham High Street. If you start siphoning off the people who go to Keynsham High Street to other people, it's not just that there's a minor impact. Those impacts become accumulative, and eventually you'll get the collapse of Keynsham High Street. And that is something that I don't think that we as a planning authority would want in the slightest. So I think this application is in the wrong place because it's on the A4. I know there's an access on the other side, but you've got our waste services going there, and more importantly, you've got the police services going there, and no one knows what policing is going to be in the future. But if you've got a major police hub, the one thing you can be guaranteed is that they won't have any money in the budget to move it somewhere else. So policing will carry on being there. We're not going to move our waste site from there, and recycling is increasing. So I think there are a number of problems with the A4 that are major to this application, and I completely agree with the officer recommendation that on the analysis of benefits and pros and cons from all of those, that I think we should refuse. But I'd like to see more about the impact on Keynsham High Street in the report.
Councillor Jackson.
And I'd just like to speak up for the people who don't have a car, who won't be using a car to get to this supermarket, and have perhaps, in the case of a significant number of my residents, have been shopping on Keynsham High Street and have fallen over the curb and regard Keynsham High Street now as a dangerous place for an older person to be. So this Aldi, both with its price range and its accessibility, and there are actually frequent buses going past it, and you can even get the 522 from Westfield, would be a great boon. And I admit, I think we should have, if this resolution fails, I would hope we could have a delegate to permit, because there are things that need to be tidied up, and the conditions would need to be laid down. But I really feel, and you know, I feel that Councillor Crossley's not appreciating the fact that a career in retail is a career in retail, and there's proper training given, and you can, you know, rise up the ranks. It's a good opportunity for people who don't want to go to university. So I think we should see the retail as an employment offer. Now, in an ideal world, this site would go back to being a nursery, but that ain't going to happen. The nursery, the other side of Keynsham, is closed, and it's not going to be an industrial site manufacturing stuff either. We know that from trends in other estates. So I think this is a good employment opportunity, especially for younger people. It would be very accessible to people who are trying to live on a pension, and so I will be voting against the motion that's on the table.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to refuse. Do you wish to sum up, Councillor Simon? Okay, let's go to the vote. Those in favour? We're voting on refuse. Opposite recommendation, yes. Those in favour? Those against? That falls. I'm not using my card.
I want to abstain, if I may.
I'm looking for a motion to table floor now because that one's fallen on the time vote. I'm not using my casting vote this time, but motion's fallen, so I'm looking for another motion for the floor. Councillor Jackson.
I propose that we delegate to permit this application so that officers can work out appropriate conditions. And I meant to say I didn't think that the highways issues were the responsibility of the applicant either. But we have a very professional team, and I'm sure that we can work out appropriate conditions. And I would propose the motion that we delegate to permit on the grounds that the benefits outweigh the disbenefits, that it will provide important opportunities. It will involve important opportunities for employment, and it will also, I'm not quite sure what policy we will put this under, but it would increase the accessibility of of choice and commercial advantage for people who don't have much money. But I can't think of a suitable word to incorporate that. I'm sure the officers can.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Order. Sorry, I didn't hear properly what your vote, how you cast your...
I did not use a casting vote. It fallen on a tied vote.
It was a 4-4 tied vote.
I didn't use a casting vote, so it falls.
Sorry, you used...
I did not use a casting vote, so the motion falls on a tied vote. Okay? Okay, I did not use my casting vote.
It was not carried, and therefore...
Carried, we're on a new motion now. Do I have a seconder for the delegate from it? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I think we've discussed the option sufficiently. I'm quite happy to support the motion to overturn the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Simon.
I'll have to think about how I vote on this, but if we're going to delegate to permit, I think that the delegation should include consideration of a condition requiring solar panels in the car park to maximise the use of energy, and it should include travel planning for the staff and for deliveries not to exacerbate the travel problems, and that it probably should include a consideration of whether a contribution to signalising either the Pixash Lane or the Broadmead roundabout accesses, and if one of those is chosen, then the other should be restricted. In other words, I think if we're going to agree this, some pretty powerful mitigations to avoid gridlock in the estate will be needed, and those should be considered as part of the delegation. Indeed, there might be a merit in asking for it to come back to committee.
Okay, Councillor Jackson, are you happy to accept what's been said there?
I think Councillor Simon has raised some really important points, especially when you think of the benefits of having solar panels there, if that is feasible.
He also raised the issue, should it return to committee?
I think the officer should advise on that one, and you, Chair, whether you feel so.
So members could choose to request the application to return to committee with a suite of conditions recommending for permission. Just in terms of what Councillor Simon did say, the proposal does have solar panels on its roof. To put solar panels across the whole car park on top of the cars, I think would be excessive and would require permission in its own right. So I would think that would fall outside what we could reasonably ask them to do. But certainly we could look at a travel plan conditions regarding most of the things that Councillor Simon said, and if members did want it to return. to committee to look at the conditions that we were to put on it. If members were minded to approve it, then we certainly could do.
Councillor Jackson?
I assume we would just be looking at the conditions and that we wouldn't be making another decision on whether we should have an Aldi there or not. One thing we haven't noted is the fact that they don't do internet shopping. There's no click and collect. Would we want to exclude that from happening in the future because of the traffic problems?
Again, I don't think that would be something that would be reasonable to control. In terms of it, just coming back to committee, if you were to delegate to permit, we could certainly take into consideration what we consider reasonable for that Councillor Simon agreed to. As far as officer recommendation, I think conditions are mainly down to kind of consideration by officers, so I'm not sure if there would be much to be gained by returning to committee. We would be able to come with a reasonable set of conditions. So it would completely down to members to decide if they want it to come back with conditions, but I would recommend that officers are capable of coming up with conditions that are satisfactory and would address the majority of the concerns that were raised at this meeting.
Can I suggest, Chair, that we have two votes? We have a vote delegate to permit, and then we could possibly, but I would incline to agree with the officer.
I think we could...
That the conditions would be a separate, whether that should come back would be a separate vote.
I think we could, if Chair minded to, we could do a vote on delegate to permit without it coming back to committee with the conditions. And if that was to fail, then we could do a further vote for it to come back to committee. So I would go vote first on delegate to permit, see what the outcome of that one would be.
Okay, we're on delegate permits. I've got Councillor Gordy next.
So I hope this is the right moment to ask this because I'm slightly confused by the process. My chief concern is the impact, particularly on the waste disposal site. So I don't know what mitigations could be put in from the exit and egress to the A4 to enable that to be improved. I mean, that's my main concern about this.
I don't think there's any proposed conditions that we would put on that specifically to address that point.
Councillor Simon.
I'm going to invite Councillor Jackson to withdraw her motion, and I'm going to suggest that the motion should be that this committee is minded to agree in principle that a further report come to the committee demonstrating how best to mitigate effects in the area on traffic and a full set of conditions, and that on that basis we will look at where the specific impacts on the vulnerable receptors in the area can be best mitigated.
Councillor Jackson.
Sorry, Chair, I think that's confusing the issue. And I would point out that I have never been to that recycling centre because I have not got a vehicle. So, you know, it's a separate issue, that one.
Okay, we're on delegate permits now.
I think if there were simple conditions that we could put onto the application to make the highways condition acceptable, our officers would be recommending them. So I don't think it is reasonable to ask for those conditions. There are certainly some conditions that we would be able to put onto it, certainly regarding to making sure that they put the sustainability, such as solar panels on the roof, hours of operation, and the standard construction management and those types of conditions, but there aren't, it isn't considered that there are suitable conditions that would overcome the reasons for the highways officer has recommended this one for that we are recommending this one for refusal on highways grounds.
Okay, we have got a motion to delegate to permit on the table now. Councillor Warren, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to bring it back to reality and say we have a motion. I think we vote on the motion, and then if that falls, Councillor Simon can then move another one. So just bring it back to where we are a little bit. Thank you.
Councillor Horsall?
The simple question is, and you know, if we do vote on Councillor Jackson's motion, I don't know, has that been seconded yet? You've seconded it. Oh no, you've seconded it. Simple issue is, do the benefits outweigh the harm? Whilst the harm is severe, I remember when IKEA was built on the M32, it was bedlam for the first few months, but people changed their habits, and I agree with what Councillor Hughes said earlier on. You know, if people aren't going to go and drive there if they know it's going to be busy, so they will go at a different time, and they will be very flexible in terms of the opening hours. Yes, I can see the concerns about the waste and recycling centre, but surely that closes at 3, doesn't it? I should know that, shouldn't I, really? And then the modelling's only been based on the afternoon peak, so the refuse and recycling centre is actually winding down towards the mid-late afternoon anyway. So anyway, I'll vote on this occasion.
Okay, we're back to another vote, but Councillor Jackson's going to sum up.
I was just going to point out that if the situation was intolerable at the recycling centre, they could always go to the Radstock Road one in Midsummer Norton. Yes, I'd just like to sum it up that although we appreciate the problems and the burdens that would be put on the highways with this, the development of this store, it nevertheless, the benefits, especially for people who are vulnerable and excluded because they have no vehicle, would outweigh it, and also because of the employment and training opportunities, which I know all about being a director of the co-op, you know, would outweigh the... Well, I'm very pushed to see that there's a very great deal of harm because it's all off-site, and surely we have to be fair to the applicant and the people who support this resolution, that ultimately it's our experts, our highly trained highways officers who will be able to crack it. So I commend delegate to
Okay, we're now voting on delegate to permit. Those in favour?
6. 6.
Those against? And those abstaining? That is carried 6-2 and 1 abstention. We are now on to the final item on the agenda, appeals reports. Anybody want to comment? Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, I'm a bit disturbed, and I have mentioned it to the officers, about the fact we have lost so many appeals. Normally at this time, I commend our hard-working officers and the excellent performance they put in, and we've won practically all the appeals. I mean, by that I mean the appeals have been dismissed. But something seems to have happened. I'm not quite sure in what period it would be, because some of these appeals take so long to come forward and get heard. But I wondered if we could be enlightened about what the problem is. And it could even be the problem that we're not getting the reasons right for refusal. I don't know. Well, what?
So, thank you. I'll just quickly run through the 4 appeals that were allowed. They were all delegated, so they weren't decisions that were made by this committee. We do have a very good track record of appeals, and this just seems to be a little blip where we got 4 overturns essentially in a very short period of time. 3 of those were actually applications for prior approval, which is part of the permitted development right for agricultural uses. So the first one was Halfway Farm in Stanton Drew, which was a prior approval for conversion of an agricultural building to four dwellings. That was allowed on a procedural technicality because we only have 56 days to determine those applications, and we considered that not enough information had been provided for us to determine the application, and so we didn't start the clock. However, the inspectors said that we should have started the clock, and we didn't get a decision out in time. So that is something that we will certainly be taking into consideration when we are looking at these again. But that was very much a procedural one. The second one was Knoll Farm in Peasdown. That was prior approval for an agricultural barn, which was within the distance from Oxmead Airstrip, which the GDPO precludes development within a certain distance of an aerodrome. We, and so had the inspector previously, considered Oxmead Airstrip as an aerodrome. The applicant in this instance got some legal advice that actually it shouldn't be considered an airstrip, so that fell down on that one. We now obviously won't consider Oxmead Airstrip an aerodrome anymore for the determination of prior approvals. The third one was Broadlands Fruit Farm, again a prior approval that was for a flexible commercial proposal. That was refused on amenity grounds, and the inspector disagreed with us on that one. And the final one was for a two-storey residential extension within the green belt, which we didn't consider appropriate development because it was significantly exceeded what we thought was appropriate in size. However, the inspector determined that it was not of a great enough size to warrant refusal. So that kind of gives the notion that the inspectorate is getting more sort of relaxed with development in the green belt. But those are the four. I don't think they particularly should worry members of us not being able to defend our decisions. I would say that it's just a little blip, and obviously we will continue to report these decisions to members. Thank you.
I just comment that I don't think losing appeals is necessarily a bad thing. I think if you don't lose a few appeals, you're probably being too lax. My view is that if we keep our lost appeals down to about a quarter to a third of our caseload, and it's well below that, we are probably reaching the right judgments. But that was certainly the view of the planning team, my last authority, that you shouldn't worry about losing a few, especially where you can understand the reasons and learn from the judgments in the way that Adrian's just explained.
Very briefly, Councillor Jackson.
Worried, you see, we didn't have enough officers to prepare the work. That, to be quite honest, is what I had thought. And a few years back, I campaigned that we have extra staff in the planning department to cover these sort of needs. But also going back into the dark ages when I was first on this committee, we used to get a little paragraph explaining the reasons why we'd lost the appeal in the document that's released. And you did such an excellent summary of those 4 appeals that we lost. I wondered if we could revert to that and just have a little paragraph saying it was lost because the inspector thought that, or whatever it is.
Certainly look into that, and that's something I'll discuss with the chair.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. The meeting is now closed. The next meeting date's Karina, I've lost track of my paperwork now. I think it's, sorry, my screen's gone blank.
8th, 12th,
8th of July, okay? Thank you.